Hi everyone, and welcome to my series on learning 3D LUT Creator. Today we're going to be tackling the Volume tab, and if you stay tuned towards the end of the video, we're also going to be color grading a photograph. Now if you're new to this series, or even if you've seen prior videos but would like to review them, I'm going to leave a link to the Learning 3D LUT Creator series playlist above. And I truly appreciate your support. If you find content like this useful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd click on the subscribe button below. Now let's get to the video. So last week we took a look at the Channels tab. Today we're going to have a look at the Volume tab. And as you can see, the interface looks very similar to the Channels tab, but in fact they do different things, though they are related. To get a sense of what the Volume tab is doing and how it's related to the Channels tab, we need to take a quick hop over to the channel mixer adjustment in Photoshop, even though that's something we usually try to stay away from. So here we are in Photoshop with the same image, and you'll remember in the last video I quickly showed that there were two ways of using the channel mixer, and that's what we need to quickly take a look at. So I'm going to put a channel mixer adjustment layer here on top of the image, and this is the default way the channel mixer opens. And what this does, it says for the red channel, what component of the red channel should be composed of the other channels. So in normal mode, the way you would normally look at a picture, the red channel consists of 100% of the red channel. But we can of course switch that around so that the red channel contains more of the green channel or the blue channel, for example. And of course, here we need to try to make sure that it adds up to 100%, which 3D LUT Creator does automatically. These are the kind of changes that the Channel Mixer tab in 3D LUT Creator controls. So these changes are controlling the color of the image. Again, this is exactly what the Channel tab in 3D LUT Creator is doing, albeit with an easier to use interface and automatic normalization, so this number is always kept at 100% as the combination of all three channels. Now, there's no good way to reset these to the way they were when it opened up, so I'm just going to delete this layer and put another channel mixer adjustment layer on top of the image. The second way that I mentioned in that video from last week of using the channel mixer is to take the channel mixer layer and put it into luminosity mode and click on the monochrome tab. And what that does is it determines within the entire image what percent of the image is made of each individual channel. So again, we have to add up to 100, but we can change the contributions to the image of the individual channel. Now that makes it very dark, but now our number is only 16, so we have to bring it up to 100. But what it's doing is it's changing the contribution that each color channel makes to the image. Again, not very intuitive way, and we're going to look at it in 3D LUT Creator. But this manner of using the channel mixer adjustment layer by going to luminosity for the blend mode and clicking monochrome and adjusting the contributions of the three channel to the total image, that's what the Volume tab in 3D LUT Creator is doing. So let's get out of Photoshop and back to 3D LUT Creator. So here we are back in 3D LUT Creator in the Volume tab, and we are presented with one square, and if we left click on that square and drag it around, we can move that square all around, and as you can see, as we're moving the square, the image changes. Now if we want to reset it, we can go back to our usual location here that resets all our grids, or we can double left click on the square. Now, so what's happening as I'm moving it around? Well, just like the channel mixer, there's some rules. So if we move the square towards a color or a color channel, for example, if we move the square towards the reds, the reds and the red components of all the colors will get lighter. As you move the square to a specific color channel, that channel gets lighter or brighter. If you move it away from a specific color, that color gets darker. So, according to that rule, if I take this square and move it up towards the reds should get lighter. And since I'll be moving it away from the blues and the greens, although greens will be tougher to see in this particular image, but I'm moving it away from the blues, so the blues should get darker. So what that says is if I move this up here, the sky, the blues should get darker, and the sand, which has a good deal of red, should get brighter. Let's give it a try. And there we go. That's exactly what happened. Now, of course, this may look too bright, and so we may want to lower that a bit. We could control some more specifics by moving it off to the sides. Now, unlike the channel mixer, if you go really crazy with this, you can break your image, as you can see. It's tougher to do that in the channel mixer. But if you stay within reasonable boundaries, everything becomes normalized and balanced. So let's reset this for a moment. And I'm going to show you a couple of features which may not be immediately apparent. So let's say I had moved this over here, and I like, what it's done to the colors and the combination. But let's say I'd like the whole image to be a little bit brighter. In this instance, let's try there. That's a little better. I like that ratio of lightness to darkness in the different color channels, but I'd like the whole thing to be a little lighter. Well, if you shift click and drag up, you can make the whole image a little lighter. And if you shift click and drag down, you can make the whole image a little darker. Say you decide you don't like that, but you want to leave the dot right where it is. So if you double click it, you reset everything and the dot goes right here. But if I shift right click, now the brightness change that I made went away, but the square stays right where it is. Okay, so here's another really neat feature. I'm going to reset this. If we come to the mode drop down, and you can see here it says single, meaning a single point. But if we go to the drop down here and click on shadows and highlights, we get 2 points, one of which controls the highlights and the other the shadows, and they follow the same rules. So if I move the highlights towards the reds that are highlights are going to get brighter. If I move the shadows towards the blues that are considered shadows are going to get lighter. But how do we figure out what is shadows and what is highlights? Well, you think like 3D LUT Creator, and as we've seen in all the other tabs, if I hold down the Alt key and click on the shadows, I can tell what's shadows and highlights, or what 3D LUT Creator considers shadows and highlights. The blues are shadows, and the yellow is highlights. And it's going to be the same exact picture for both. So you can see the trees are clearly in shadows. Some of the sand is sort of half and half, and the sky, obviously, particularly the clouds, are the highlights. So this really gives us very exquisite control in the volume tab. Now I've reset the grid back to 1 point because I wanted to show you one further thing. In the channel mixer, I did not discuss these Luma modes, and we've been working here in gamma. And it's important to know the difference between gamma add and multiply. They do a little bit different effect, so I'm going to just darken the sky here in gamma. Now what happens is, if instead of gamma mode we were in multiply, once we're in multiply mode, anything that we've darkened, like the sky, will have a decrease in saturation. And I'm going to ask you to watch the sky, and you'll see when I switch to multiply mode, the sky gets less saturated. And the opposite is true for things that we've lightened. They become more saturated. However, in add mode, the exact opposite is true. Anything that we darken becomes more saturated. Watch the sky. And anything that we've lightened becomes less saturated. Of course, we can mitigate some of those changes, just like we can mitigate some of the lightening and darkening changes right over here, just like in the channel mixer. Okay, so we've gone over a lot, and I mean a lot of rules in both the mixer tab and the volume tab. And if you're like me, these rules just make your eyes glaze over. Plus, even with the rules, things still seem a bit unpredictable, maybe even more than a bit. So I'm going to tell you how in real terms I use these tabs, and I'm going to demonstrate on this photograph. But first, let's reset the grid here. So before we make any adjustments to this photograph, let me tell you a few of the ideas that I have when using the channel tab and the volume tab. First of all, I have sort of an idea of where I'd like to go with the image, but I'm always open to experimentation with new ideas that become generated from moving the points around, which leads to my next idea. I play around with the points to see what happens and focus on the area of the interface that really seems to be generating the most interesting results for me. Remember that the channel and the volume tab are best actually used together, with the volume tab adjusting whatever interesting color grading you've gotten by using adjustments in the channels tab. Remember that when moving a point in the mixer and volume tabs, that you're adjusting not just one color, but the component that that color has within all the colors of the image, because every color is made of a red, green, and blue component. Finally, when you get somewhere you like with the image, remember that you can always go and adjust very specific colors, not the component of the colors in all the colors of the image, but the actual singular color that you pick by going to the other grids like the AB and the CL grid after you finish in the channel and mixer tab. Okay, let's get started and see what we can do with this photo. Okay, so this is going to be a little freewheeling. Let's go to the channels tab. And I'm thinking it would be interesting in terms of a bit of a color grade to have more cyan in the blue sky, and then maybe make some adjustments to the color of the sands with either some yellow or red. So I know I want to start with some cyan in the sky. So I'm going to take this point, and by moving it to the right, I'm going to push the cyans into the blue, like so. Now, when I've done that, let's make it a little more blue somewhere in there. Now, when I've done that, I've made the sand far too red. So I know that if I keep somewhere in here with the blues and the cyans, that playing around with this point is going to adjust the yellows and the reds. So let's play around with it. Let's just move it around and see how it goes. Well, certainly up here there's less red, and this is getting a little too greenish. So, I like the way the sand looks sort of in there. And now we can go this way and see how much cyan we have. And the sand is changing some. But let's see. Maybe a little less. It sort of looks interesting to me right around there. Now, that's not to say that I couldn't play around and, make all sorts of odd changes. Actually, that's not bad either. But let's just say we're going to go with something right around here. So now I'm going to go to the volume tab. And what I usually do in the volume tab is to split it into shadows and highlights. And we can separate these a little bit and just hold down Alt and see what the shadows and highlights are. So the shadows are pretty much going to be the trees and the sand over here. So let's take the shadows, and maybe we want to make, let's move it around. Maybe we want to make the red a little darker or lighter. I sort of like that. And then the highlights are obviously going to be the sky. By moving it towards, we make that brighter. Now, and you can see that there's a blue component in the sand as well, although not as marked as in the sky. So we can now sort of, that's too dark. So we can sort of make an adjustment like that, say. Now, let's take a look at what we've done. The backslash will bring us to the before, and the backslash again will show us the changes that we've made. And if I hit C on my keyboard, you can see that we've made some pretty dramatic changes with the channel and the volume tab. Now, we may want to change the color of the sand just a little bit. So like I said, we don't have to worry about changing colors, for example, in the sky when we make that adjustment. If we go to the AB tab, and now we can see that this represents the sand. Let's say we want the sand to be a little more yellow. We can try, there we go. Try moving it like that. A little more saturated perhaps. And then if we go to the CL, use the dropper, get to that color, put the eyedropper back. We can try adding a little, perhaps like we did in one of the other videos, adding a little contrast by making into the sand, by making the lights lighter and the darks darker. And you can see we've added that contrast with some lightness here and darkness here. And so once again, we can go backslash. That's the image we started with. And this is what we've ended up with. Again, C will let us compare the pre and the post. I like what we've done. I'm hitting the C again to bring us back to our current state. And we can send this LUT to Photoshop. And there we have it. And of course, as usual, we can adjust our opacity. And if you want to see what we've done, off and on. And so with just a very few moves, we've really changed what's going on in this photograph. Well, I hope you found that useful. And it really was fun to color grade an actual photo towards the end of the video there. Now, I appreciate your support. And if you find content like this useful, I'd certainly appreciate your subscribing to the channel and giving it a thumbs up. We'll see you next time.